You know, in project management, we talk a lot about high-level strategy, but today we're getting our hands dirty with the numbers, the quantitative reality of financial control. We're going to move past just the what and get right into the how much, mastering the calculations that make sure every single pound spent is a deliberate move towards success. Okay, let's jump right in.
So here's our game plan. We'll kick things off by connecting big-picture strategy to the numbers on the ground. Then, we're going to tear down the financial risk-sharing engine to see how it works. After that, we'll run through a real-world case study and tackle the super important idea of the point of total assumption. We'll wrap it all up with some key tips for your PMP exam and your day-to-day projects before a quick review of the core principles.
So, first things first, let's set the stage. Why should you care so much about all this number crunching? Well, it's simple. These aren't just details for the accounting department. Nope. These are your fundamental tools for governance and control.
And this quote, this really gets to the heart of it. If you ignore these numbers, it's like you're trying to fly a plane without an instrument panel. You are absolutely going to risk losing control right when you need it most. You know, that moment when a vendor is in trouble and your budget is on the line.
Now, what's so cool here is seeing where these tools actually come into play. You've already planned your procurement, you've picked your vendor. Now you're in the control procurements phase. And these calculations, they become your active sensors, kind of like lookouts in your watchtower. They give you the clear, objective, black and white data you need to enforce that contract and keep the whole project on track.
Okay, let's get into the core mechanics. I want you to think of an incentive contract like it's a machine, right? A machine that's specifically designed to get the buyer and the seller pulling in the same direction. And just like any machine, it's made of very specific, interlocking parts.
And everything starts right here with the target cost. This is your foundation. It's the agreed-upon estimate for all the work. You can think of it as the financial bullseye that the seller is aiming for.
So next up is the target fee. This is the seller's baseline profit. If they nail the target cost perfectly, this is the fee they walk away with. But, and this is the crucial part, this number is not set in stone. It's just the starting point that's going to get adjusted up or down depending on how they actually perform on cost. And this is the clever part that does all the adjusting, the sharing ratio. It tells you exactly how you're going to split any cost savings or, on the flip side, any overruns. And you've got to remember this. The first number is always the buyer's share, the second is the seller's. This isn't just some random percentage. It's a very strategic decision about who takes on the financial risk.
And this slide really shows you what a strategic choice this is. Look at a 90-10 ratio. That means the buyer is taking on most of the risk. They're willing to eat 90% of any cost overrun. But a 50-50 ratio? That creates a totally balanced partnership where both of you have equal skin in the game.
And finally, for a specific type of contract, the fixed price incentive fee, or FPIF, we have the ceiling price. This is the ultimate safety net for you, the buyer. It's a hard cap. It's the absolute maximum amount you will ever pay, no matter how high the seller's costs go. It is your financial stop loss.
Okay, we've got all the components, we understand the parts of the machine. Now let's put it to work. We're going to run through a case study to see how all these numbers actually dance together in a real-world scenario.
So here's the setup. Our target cost is £1 million with a target fee of $100,000. The sharing ratio is 70-30, and we've got a ceiling of $1.2 million. But, the seller hits some snags, and the actual cost ends up at £1.1 million. So the big question is, what's the final price the buyer pays?
Let's walk through it step by step. First, we figure out the cost variance. That's a £100,000 overrun. Simple enough. Second, we apply the seller's share of that overrun, which is 30%. So that's £30,000. Third, we subtract that £30,000 penalty from their original target fee. That leaves them with a final fee of $70,000. And finally, we just add the actual cost to that new final fee.
And that gives us our final price, £1,170,000. Now here's the key takeaway. Because this total is below the £1.2 million ceiling, this is the final amount that gets paid. See how that worked? The seller got penalized for the overrun, but they still made a profit. The incentive logic worked perfectly.
All right. Now for one of the most powerful and honestly one of the most misunderstood concepts in all of contract management. We're talking about the point of total assumption, or PTA. This is a number that every single project manager needs to have on their radar.
So what is it? Well, the PTA is the exact cost where the whole incentive system just breaks for the seller.
It's the moment their costs have piled up so high that the final price slams right into the contract ceiling. And from that point on, the contract basically turns into a firm fixed price deal. The seller now pays for 100% of every single additional pound of cost out of their own pocket.
And here's the formula you use to calculate it. The whole point of this formula is simple. It's to find that financial cliff for the seller. Knowing exactly where that cliff is ahead of time, well, that gives you a massive advantage when you're managing your vendor relationship.
And this is so important because as soon as the seller even gets close to that PTA, their entire motivation changes. It's not about profit anymore. They're in full-on damage control, just trying to minimize their losses. And that's your cue as the project manager to be on high alert for stuff like cutting corners on quality or, even worse, on safety.
Okay, let's bring all this home. Let's connect the theory to what you're actually going to face, both on the PMP exam and, more importantly, out there on your real projects.
All right, if you're studying for the PMP, you've got to watch out for these common traps. First, if you do an CPIF calculation and your number goes over the ceiling, the answer is the ceiling. Always. No exceptions. Second, remember the sharing ratio is always buyer than seller. Don't get it twisted. And for CPIF contracts, the ones with no ceiling, always check to see if there are rules about a minimum or maximum fee.
Now, in the real world, you don't just wait until the project is over to do this math. Not at all. You use these calculations proactively, all the time, during your procurement performance reviews. You take your forecast data from earned value management, you plug it in, and you can see if a seller is trending towards their PTA. That lets you have a calm, data-driven conversation about risk way before it blows up into a crisis. So, to pull all of this together and make sure it really sticks, let's do one last quick review of the core numerical principles you need to have this stuff down cold. Just remember these key rules. The target price? That's just your cost plus your fee. The final price on an CPIF contract? That's the actual cost plus whatever that adjusted fee becomes. The ceiling price is that non-negotiable hard stop for the buyer. PTEA is the cliff where the seller's incentives disappear. And with CPIF, it's all about looking for those fee boundaries.
Whew! We have covered a ton of ground here, from the big picture strategy all the way down to the nuts and bolts of the formulas. You now have the tools you need to manage the financial health of pretty much any incentive-based contract. So the real question is, how are you going to take this system and apply it to make sure you maintain control from day one on your next project?